joining me is Lua Yuille. She's from the University of Kansas Law School, and Lua has been tracking immigration reform very closely. Lua, tell me, can you kind of give us a big picture of where things stand right now?
Well, the big picture is actually just as complicated as you intimate. There are actually 5 big executive orders that deal with immigration. But obviously the one at the top of everyone's mind is the one that has been going around and around in courts, and that is the executive order that was first issued in January, stayed, reissued in March, and recently
we're talking the Muslim
allowed,
ban, if everyone calls it the Muslim ban.
The executive order that everyone calls the Muslim ban or the travel ban, recently allowed to come into effect, and then just yesterday, again narrowed. And so it's actually hard to articulate clearly where we stand. What we know is that in October or sometime after October, the Supreme Court may actually finally give us an answer about whether what everyone is calling a Muslim ban, what the administration is now even calling a travel ban, is lawful or not. As a practical matter, as of yesterday, we are pretty much back in a boat where a very, very narrow set of individuals might be prevented from coming to the United States.
Who are those people?
A court in Hawaii yesterday basically said extended family members of potential visitors to the United States can be prevented from coming to the United States.
And
people with
forgive me if I'm wrong, but you were talking about those select, I think it was 6 or 7 countries in the Middle East. Those folks might be turned away, even right now while things are in court.
Yes, but again, as of last night, it was Hawaii time, so I'm hearing about it at 9 o'clock my time. I'm in California right now. As of last night, it's from those 6 countries, people without a close family member, and now close family member includes your grandparents, includes your in-laws, includes your aunts, includes your uncles, includes your cousins. What exactly cousin means is not clear. We don't have great answers there. But that really puts us back in a place where formally very few people are actually subject to this travel ban. That being said, as a practical matter, anybody who's traveling from the Middle East can find themselves or may find themselves facing greater scrutiny. And frankly, anybody who is traveling from any place in the world can find themselves under greater scrutiny than has been the custom, let's say, in the last.
Well, because I was going to ask you this, enforcement's a really big part of this. There hasn't really been a lot of precedent set as to how to enforce this, what's proper, what's not, and even what's proper in identifying these people.
Exactly, and what's more important for people to understand, and my students have to be reminded over and over, when an individual has a visa to come to the United States, they do not have carte blanche permission to enter the United States. What a visa gives you, visas are traditionally acquired outside the United States.
Right. What
it gives you permission to do is come to the U.S. border and ask for permission to enter the United States. At that moment, when you get your visa and you ask for permission, the customs officer or the immigration officer has to make a determination on the spot whether you qualify under the category under which you're seeking to come to the United States. So if you say you're a tourist, if you get a tourist visa, that just gives you permission to come to an immigration officer and ask to come into the United States. And that person has wide discretion.
Right.
So, as of last night, that immigration officer is not formally or legally allowed to deny someone admission to the United States if they're from Syria, and their only connection to someone in the United States is having a grandchild. However, there are, I can just think up off the top of my head, 10 other reasons that they can legitimately deny you entrance
related
into the
to
United
this ban
States.
or just in general?
No, related to how the law stands generally. So for example, here's a great one. If you're coming from Syria, covered by the travel ban. You have a grandchild, so you now are, under the law, not prohibited. You're not covered by the ban. You come to the United States. You have a visitor's visa. Come to the United States. You're at the border. You seek permission. Well, one of the things that you have to have in order to come to the United States as a tourist, which we also call just a plain visitor, you have to show that you have strong ties to your home country.
Person. Oh, to the country.
No,
okay.
to your home country.
Okay.
Because we have to believe that you're going to leave. Well, right now, Syria is a war-torn country. Your home may have been destroyed. Bank accounts have been frozen. So what evidence do you have of your strong, ongoing connection to Syria?
And
in that
believe
case,
that.
Exactly. And in that case, the border control officer can say, you haven't proven to me that you meet the qualifications to enter the United States as a tourist. That's just one off the top of my head.
Do you have any insight into the training these officers are given just in general, the scrutiny they're under right now, or even any training related to this travel ban as it goes through the court system?
Well, that's no longer a question that we can answer really clearly. As the administration changed, we got the first executive order implementing what was called this Muslim travel ban, and we saw really unprecedented on-the-ground implementation, right? So we had the president signed his executive order, in the afternoon, and I don't know how many minutes later, hours later, at the border, people are being subjected to the travel ban. That is something that is unprecedented. Normally what happens? The president issues an executive order. The agency tries to understand it. Then the agency, so in this case it would be USCIS, that's United States Citizen and Immigration Services, that's going to be the State Department, that's going to be Immigration and Customs Enforcement. All of these agencies are going to read the order, figure out what their role is. Then the heads of these agencies are going to issue guidance. And then supervisors, let's say at the airport, right, it will trickle down. Then supervisors at the airport are going to call together all of their immigration officers and explain to them what the steps are. That is historically how it works. That's what we would have expected to have happened. That's not what happened in January.
Right, we all saw people being detained immediately.
So all bets are really off on what kind of training is happening. Frankly, from the perspective of an observer, but an observer who's pretty close to the situation, it looks like people are understanding the executive orders based on what they're hearing. And I mean people, obviously we are, but actual immigration officers are understanding the executive orders at least partially based on what they're hearing in the news media, and trying to figure out what that means, which is absolutely, to me, unprecedented. It's not how any of these agencies have worked ever. I have cases that have been waiting for guidance from the agencies for 10, 15 years. So I have had
a long process, right? Usually it's not something that happens over when you get to the airport.
And the service telling me we're not making any moves because we don't have the guidance yet. So, something happening same day is crazy.
So let's jump to individuals that have family members that might be affected, grandchildren of individuals from these affected countries. Is there any kind of guidance you can give to them?
This is me being really frank. Coming to the United States from the countries covered by the Trump executive order has never been easy. Never.
Right.
We don't have a huge number of people coming from those countries, have never had, and in the post 9/11 era, it was never going to be easy to come from these countries. I think now it'll be marginally harder, but the formal process is the same. If you're holding a Syrian passport, that formal process looks very different because we don't have any agency presence in Syria.
Right.
But if you're from Jordan, the process looks the same. And what I tell people and what I've told people, since coming into this area of practice, has always been, if you're coming from any country in the Middle East, frankly, you need to be doubly able to prove all of the requisites, the requirements to come to the United States. So if you're coming as a tourist, normally the agency will expect you to just have enough money in a bank account that you can show that you have to complete your trip. That means come to the United States, stay in the United States for the 2 to 3 weeks, the month that you're going to stay here without working, get back home, and not be bankrupt when you get back home. That's what I normally tell people to have. People coming from the Middle East, but frankly, I tell people coming from Latin America as well, right? It's not easy to come to the United States, so you want to have abundant evidence that you meet the requirements. And so the biggest advice, if you decide to roll the dice, if a family member decides to roll the dice and try it out, they should be triply, doubly able to prove each of the elements for the kind of entrance that they're seeking. So if that's tourist, if that's a student visa, in order to come to the United States as a student, you need to prove that you can pay your tuition, full tuition, without working.
Right.
So again, you're going to want to be able to prove that not only can you pay your full tuition without working, but that your family in your home country is going to be able to survive. So, normally if you were from France, I would say just, have enough money in the bank so that you can show you can pay your tuition. It doesn't really matter if there's any money left over significantly after paying your tuition and living expenses. For someone from one of these areas, I would say just be really careful. And again, only enter into this process if you have the money to lose and are willing to roll the dice, because it's not a sure thing. Changes in the courts that are liberalizing this travel ban still don't make it a sure thing.
Right. Well, listen, it sounds like some practical advice, maybe stuff we don't want to hear because we don't want to hear things being that difficult. But hey, you know what? This is where things stand, and this is a developing issue. And I hope that Lua, you'll stay with us, and as things develop, you'll give us a little bit more insight.